one of the projects that I have been working on, as you mentioned, is on Lake Okeechobee. And we do a lot of tree plantings. It seems pretty obvious what they should do, but I'll go into that a little bit more. But so in this case, we're restoring a historical bald cypress fringe on Lake Okeechobee in the Northwest Marsh. So historically, for those of you who are not too familiar, Okeechobee was actually surrounded by quite a bit of wetland trees. In the south end, it's actually pond apple, big forest of pond apple. Up in the northeast and even in a little bit in the northwest side, we had cypress. For those who go to Okeechobee now, you don't really see these cypress or pond apple forests anymore. They're just not present. So this is a map from 1914. Obviously kind of a rough sketch at the time, but it just, it's kind of hard to read from here, but you can kind of see the different vegetation types they had that he estimated was around the lake. This is kind of a highlight of the northwest marsh of Lake Okeechobee. You can see that the bald cypress, it ringed the northern, eastern, and western marsh edges. Right here, so this is Lake Estapoga. It used to be a sheet flow that went into Lake Okeechobee during high water. And in this little band here, you can see this kind of crosshatch. It's very thin, but this was all bald cypress type habitat. These were all just marshes and that type of stuff. So this was a map from 1943, before all the levees were completely in place. In the early 1900s, quite a bit of the cypress and other trees around the lake were starting to be harvested. There's the Rawlinson sawmill. It's a 1915 picture on the top left. 1914, there's another sawmill that was in Okeechobee at the time. It was called Tanty, not Okeechobee. So this, decimated a lot of the cypress that were there. So you think, well, all right, they logged it. Shouldn't it just regrow on its own? I mean, it's a tree, they have seeds, there should be a seed base, it should come back. Well, cypress, everybody thinks they're water tolerant. Well, they are. They do like the water to a certain extent, but when they're small and they're seedlings, they cannot handle being inundated for longer than a month. And even the seeds, they will not grow. They will not sprout if there's too much water. You need a drought. Or if if it's too dry and you get a lot of fires, of course, now you've just killed all your seedlings. So it's very specific to get seedling regrowth. And in the natural scheme of things, yes, it would regrow. But of course, as we know, Okeechobee is no longer completely natural. So they added in the Herbert Hoover Dike in the northern end of the lake. The dike as it is now is put in the 50s, 60s. So that dramatically changed the hydrology. The sheet flow from Lake Estapoga was basically reduced to canals, water control structures. There is no marsh going into Okeechobee from there. So it definitely changed the hydrology right there. They also allowed cattle to graze inside the levee for a number of years, up until about the 1970s, 1980s. This is a picture we found actually in the area that I'm going to be talking about. We think it might be an old, cattle trough or something like that, but it's in the lake. They allowed grazing, so any sort of resprouting you did wind up having probably got eaten, and eventually you run out of a seed base. So why do we even care about cypress? I mean, it's a tree, it's associated with wetlands, but what does it really do? I mean, it provides forage for a wide variety of species. Many birds will eat the seeds or the cones. They provide roosting for quite a few species: ducks, wading birds, smaller birds. They provide cover for not only birds, but deer, rabbits, fish when the water's up high. It does provide nesting for quite a few species as well. And of course, the reason why we're here, ducks. Wood ducks they're one of the few species that really do seem to like trees for nesting. Obviously, they need to be fairly large trees. They make hollows, or they use hollows, I should say, in the trees, and they nest in them. So this picture on the top right is actually in an area we planted with cypress, and this is, you know, a little small bird. We think it's a red-winged blackbird, as far as you can tell from the size of them, but it just hatched when I found that and took that picture. So, as stated before, Okeechobee has a pretty long history of waterfowl, and so this makes this kind of an important project for waterfowl on Lake Okeechobee, primarily wood ducks in this case, but it can be used by some of the other species just for roosting or cover as needed. So with that in mind, we decided the area subsection, which we've been talking about, we decided that we were going to put some money into trying to reestablish cypress in Lake Okeechobee. So to do this, we had to identify where would be the best spot to plant cypress. We wanted it to be successful. We wanted it to be in a good area of the lake. So if you look at this 1940s aerial photo, I mean, this is about as old as we could find at the time, but you can see this whiter area we've kind of circled in blue, and it's a higher area within this kind of slough area. So you look at a more recent map on the right, and that same hump or mound, whatever you want to call it, is also there. So it is still present, and when you go out and take an airboat out into that area, there's a higher area right there. So going back to that 1940s map, where that cypress fringe is, that cross-hatching, that's exactly where that mound is. It likely used to have cypress on it at one point or another. So we went out, we mapped it, mapped the whole area, got kind of estimate of acreage. The main area is probably maybe about 37 acres at most, and then it starts sloping out from there. There we go. So in 2015, we started to plant cypress, was our main species at first. We planted about 2,100 bald cypress, 100 sweet bay magnolia, and 100 cabbage palm, just to see how those others would do. We did plant 15-gallon, which, yes, they are pricier, but we found in previous plantings, going back to the inundation issue, I mean, if you plant smaller trees, a lot of times they tend to just, the water fluctuates so much on Okeechobee that they tend to not make it a lot of times if you get a rapid increase in water levels. So we found the 15 gallons tend to do the best, even with unexpected increases in water. So this is just some pictures of what we did. We got an auger out there and started digging holes and put the trees in, and it's a fairly efficient process. So now this is just an aerial view we took while the project was in process. You can see actually this white area is where we've dug all the holes, so it's white and on the green right now. And kind of gives you an idea of the levees back here for Okeechobee. We got some wet areas between this mound area and the levee, and we have wet areas, which is the lakeside down here. So this is a slightly higher area and a little bit easier. So this is when it's a little bit closer to being complete. There's still a little bit we needed to complete on the far corner here, but it's kind of looking out toward the lake. There's still quite a bit of marsh, obviously, between the cypress, where the cypress are planted, and where the open water of the lake is. This was taken in March 2015, I believe. Yeah. And the lake was about 14, 6, 7 feet. So it's actually what it is about right now. There we go. So then this was taken about a year later, also from the air. And it's a little harder to see, and that's the point, because we've gotten vegetation to regrow in between all the rows, and now the trees, which at the time were dormant, they were just sticks, now have needles. So you can see they're alive for the most part, and this is kind of what it'll look like. They'll just keep growing and growing from this point. And the lake level at this point was about 1 foot lower than when we had planted it. So you can see there's still water here, but it's kind of a lot drier than it had been before. So a little bit later, that year, we planted an additional 1,600 trees, this time in 7 gallons. We tried a variety of species. We wanted to see how they would do, not only at the smaller size, but we wanted to see how some of these other species would do, because oftentimes near a cypress fringe, you will see hardwoods, such as so we did plant additional bald cypress, but we also planted pop ash and swamp bay, persimmon, red maple, sugarberries, tupelos, hollies, and more sweet bay magnolias. So wanted to see how this would do, and now it's working. And so this was the planting project. So you can see on the left here is the new trees we planted, and we're facing the stuff we had planted a few months earlier. So there's cypress here, so you kind of see like a higher cypress line right there. So it's right next to it. And then this picture here is down here on the bottom was this February when we had all that rain. The lake came up fairly high, and this is what this cypress fringe is intended for, or partially intended for, is during periods of high water to have an area for fish, wildlife, birds to come to, because otherwise it's just grasses, prairies, sedges, all that. So in here you can see there's water right in here. This is all along we planted right within these poles here. During our project, we actually had duck boats going down this trail while we were trying to plant another project in this area. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But and then so this is just some close-ups of some of the species that I took this May. I mean they're looking really healthy. A year after planting, we've had over 90% survival for most species. There's a couple in the 80%, but a majority of them are like 95% plus. So, so far it's been really good. These just kind of show, this is before we planted. I know it's kind of hard to see a little bit, but it's just pretty much, a prairie is what it looks like. This is one day after we finished planting. We were done, so you can see the white sand. This is 6 months, starting to, so we've gotten a lot of the natives to fill in between, and then 1 year post-planting. Looks kind of same as 6 months, but they're all still alive and looking really good. So we did our third planting we did of January this year. Now, we all knew El Nino was coming, and so we thought we could beat it. So we thought we would try planting in January, and we were really close, because when we first started it was dry, but while we started planting is when it decided to dump 1 million inches of rain on us. So this one, if you're in restoration, there's always challenges, problems. You can't plan for the weather. You try as best as you can, but it does what it wants. So this one we planted another little over 1,300 bald cypress, again using the 15-gallon. And it was good that we used the 15-gallon in this case because of the water coming up during this. I don't think the smaller trees would have handled it as well. So we're basically, during the project, we were planting in rising water. We had over 1 foot of water increase in the planting site while we were planting. So that was within 15 days, the water increased. So the people planting did not have a good time. But like I was mentioning a little bit earlier about the high water, this is kind of what we intended for this area. We saw a ton of wildlife while we were doing this. This is a ringneck snake, we have osprey, we got meadowlarks, we have snail kites constantly using this site to forage right now, and then a ton of different just grackles, blackbirds, all those blackbirds that you see out there, crows. So then ton of different wading birds. We have white ibis, glossy ibis, we had blue herons, great blue herons. I mean, so many different species. If it's out there, it was probably hanging out in these trees while we were trying to plant. So it was really good. And then if you look down in between the trees, I mean, there was fish swimming in there. We had fish bedding, like right next to the trees. I mean, it was really nice. So, but before, this was all prairie, so none of these birds would have had anywhere to roost, hide, or anything like that. They would have had to leave the lake, essentially. So these are still small trees. So, you know, another 5-10 years, I mean, these could provide nesting opportunities for so many of these species. So it was a really good sign, and I think it was nice to see, even though it was in the middle of the project. So this just kind of just shows you, I mean, when we first started, it was dry out here. You know, a couple days into the project, it's starting to get a little wet. We're getting stuck a lot. And the lake's up about another half a foot at this point. And then on the last day, we're at 16.37. We started at 15.32. So it went up over a foot. And then 6 months later, I went out in July, took some pictures. All these trees have needles on them now. They're no longer dormant. We got a lot of sedges and grasses growing in between them. So it looks like it's meant to be there, you know. So they're looking really good. And then we did one final planting this May. We had a little extra funds this year. So we did just 718 trees. I actually did it on the outside edge of all the other plantings. I'll show you a map in a bit of where they're all at. And it was much drier by then. The rain had stopped for the most part, and the lake had gone back down. We were about 14.31 now instead of over 16. So it's much easier to get out there, plant the trees, even though it was in a wetter area. So in total, so this is sort of the map here. So this light blue area is our first planting. This purple area here is where we did a lot of the hardwoods, the variety of species that we tried. This yellow area is where we did our third planting this January, where it was so wet. And then this red area is where we just did in May. So you can see it's a little wetter over on this side. You can kind of tell from the satellite photo. So it was good that it was a little drier in May, trying to do that. The idea is at different lake levels to have some habitat available at different lake levels. So to date, we've spent about almost $240,000 you get any sort of wave energy back in there. You know, your outer edges especially will kind of break up some of the waves. And like I said before, we've had over 90% survival. In some areas, it's higher. So kind of a little bit on future work. So I'm definitely planning at least one additional planting to that current cypress fringe area. I'm actually looking to, if I go back here, plant kind of on this side here, do a few more of the hardwoods. They did much better than we expected, but I'm going to select for the ones that did the best, that seem to be doing the best over there. It's a little drier on that side too, that'll be nice. We might try and plant a few more lower ground cover species as well, rather than just trees. Also going to continue documenting the survival and wildlife usage that is out there. We want to see how they do 2 years from now, 3 years from now. And then we're also looking to plant throughout other parts of the lake. We have done other kinds of plantings on some of the spoil islands out there. Also looking to maybe expand into the south end. There's been some natural islands we've planted on in Fish-Eating Bay. So, you know, getting rid of the exotic species that are on a lot of these islands and putting in the native species is definitely something we're looking to do more of. So, anybody have any questions about any of that? It's pretty simple, but I think it'll provide a lot of really great wildlife benefit. So. Could. I mean, part of the reason was also for hurricane surge, because if we do get a hurricane and it would get very deep in that section, it'll push the waters into that. if you look at a lot of the literature, they do recommend an 8x8 planting, which is what we did in this. We actually did 8x8 in some of them and 9x9 in others, but they recommend that for wildlife plantings. So, and we will lose some. I mean, it always happens, you know. And then if you get a fire that goes through as well, I mean, you're going to lose a few more. So, but, any other questions? Yeah.
So were your hardwoods still at 15-gallon, or did you change up on that?
We had done those all at 7-gallon, mostly because it was a last-minute project, but it was also because, and some of the species are very difficult to get at a 15-gallon size. But they did surprisingly well, and I think part of it was the water conditions were very good for planting 7 gallons. If we had had a year like this, where the water was fluctuating pretty heavily in the winter, I don't know how they would have done. But I think I'm going to try again doing the hardwoods at a 7-gallon rate, because you do get a lot more trees, you know, for the same, for lower cost basically. It's just we were having so much problems with survival of cypress and a lot of these other trees at the smaller sizes that it just wasn't worth, you know, we're losing so many of them, it wasn't worth planting that small most of the time. The 3 gallons especially, we're having a lot of trouble, so. Any other questions? All right, thanks.
Thank you, Alyssa.